I did not like the way that I was living my life, and I did not like the path that I had went down. I made lots of choices in my life, and they led me to get my heart broken and just terrible things happening to me.
Kanada Jin 3 has become Muslim. She's a famous YouTuber, and I think a lot of people will leech off these views. She got over like 300,000 views on it. The main thing I want to say is that it's actually good that people like this go on camera and say why they converted to Islam, because years ago, when the climate was a little bit rougher, where it was like near the September 11th and the Iraq War prime type of era, it was sort of a mystery why a Westerner would convert to Islam.
I didn't like the future that was going to come over me if I did not make a change. There was a few days that I felt a little bit down, and I went to the bookstore and I went and bought this Quran. I just started to read from front to continuing forward, and I just felt like it was true. In the Quran, there's a lot of stuff that's backed by science. And in the beginning, when I decided, okay, I'm going to be Muslim, I was a little bit worried because, you have to learn how to pray.
And she mentions in this video that it's not a phase that she's going through, and I hate to break the sad news. It is a phase, and we have to face reality when it comes to these things. People go through so many phases. It's sort of like saying, I feel bad for not being Mexican, so I'm gonna wear a sombrero and sing La Cucaracha and everything and blend it with my Mexican brothers and sisters, and meanwhile the Mexican American is just like standing there, staring at you like you're an idiot.
And I know there will be people, non-Muslims, who will judge me, and sadly I know there will be Muslims who also judge me. And I've been warned by my friends that I will be judged by other Muslim people, and it is kind of hurtful and sad that they would judge one of their brothers or sisters.
I give her credit. She's not afraid to go on camera and smoke hookah and do what she wants and not wear the hijab in some of her videos, and that's exactly what the Muslim world needs to see more often. They need to see the convert like doing all this crazy stuff and saying, don't judge me, that kind of thing. And we just need to stand by on the sidelines and just be like, okay, do your thing. So I think it's great that we have this like public sphere of people like giving not so intellectual reasons of why converting to their religion.
I wasted a lot of time. The most valuable thing we have is time, because you can't take it back. You can plan to do stuff in the future, but you cannot unplan what you have already done. And I'm 27 now, and I feel like I have spent a lot of time just going around in circles. I did spend a lot of time basically going in circles.
Circles. She's spinning me around in circles again. Oh, that skinny blonde girl. Something about the ages. I failed college algebra again. That skinny blonde girl. And the circles and the ages and the ages. Beautiful.
I describe myself as a nihilist, but the study of religion has been a huge part of my life. The study of ideology and political ideology has been a huge part of my life. There was a time when I really did, when I really did convert to Buddhism, Orthodox Theravada Buddhism, and when I had to go through a process of explaining to people in my life what that religion meant and what it meant to me, and why I describe myself as being a Buddhist and not merely being a scholar of Buddhism, not merely studying Buddhism from the outside. You know how I did and didn't relate to oppressive aspects of the religion, supernatural aspects of the religion, what have you, as a white Western person, born, raised, and educated in Canada. Obviously, I couldn't relate to Theravada Buddhism the same way as a rice farmer who grew up in rural Myanmar, literally believing in ghosts, literally burning incense and making religious offerings to ghosts, or literally believing in astrology and the position of the stars determining their fate. There are all kinds of supernatural beliefs that are rolled up with Buddhism. Or indeed, obviously I wasn't the same as someone who grew up with a belief in the actual omniscience or omnipotence of the Buddha or of any of the Buddhist gods, because Buddhism is a polytheistic religion like Indra and what have you. So there was a lot to negotiate there, and there's definitely a level on which I can sympathize with Canada Jin-san's position, even though it is totally unsympathetic and indeed laughable. The first time we watched this video together, full disclosure, we laughed our asses off. Like, we laughed for like 45 minutes because it was so ridiculous. We laughed at her own rationale for why she converted to Islam, her explanation about just the shape of Saudi Arabia as a country on the map. We laughed at her use of the English language. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. She's born and raised in Canada, yet she says things like...
Just her sentence structure.
From a kid. Saudi Arabia was my favorite
Saudi Arabia was her favorite country from a kid. I mean, there's such strange use of the English language from her. There were so many things that just made us burst out laughing again and again. Her rationale for her faith. And I think also, the gap between that rationale, the excuses she's making, and what are pretty plainly the underlying reasons. Now, we both watched a couple of Woody Allen movies lately. I'd like to make a YouTube video talking about Woody Allen movies, actually, because that's also a kind of interesting topic. I'm not a Woody Allen fan, by the way. But it's kind of interesting. And, one of them was Zelig. So Woody Allen has this movie called Zelig. And Zelig really deals with the mentality of the conformist. And, sorry, so you can jump in anytime, babe. But, I mean, from my perspective, somebody like Canada Jin-san is somebody who wants to be exceptional without earning that exception. And when she first went to Japan as a young white woman, a high school dropout, somebody with no career and no ambitions and no future ahead of her, she went from being a nondescript, somewhat ugly, presumably learning disabled, white Canadian young woman to suddenly being the center of attention, to suddenly having a kind of unearned fame in Japan, being treated like a celebrity. When she went to a nightclub, all the attention was on her, being treated as beautiful and desirable and exotic. She went to Japan and she simultaneously became an ultra-conformist. She became extremely pro-Japanese, really a Japanese nationalist. And I've met and spoke with other white people who become white Japanese nationalists. It's bizarre. But again, it's not hard to imagine why. She became an ultra-conformist, but... her form of conformism, like Zelig, was not intended to become an anonymous member of the crowd. On the contrary, by conforming, she at the same time became an exception, got a kinds of undeserved positive attention, undeserved, unearned fame. She was getting all kinds of... that's all there is to say about it. Positive, flattering attention constantly. And, in terms of her work history, she has worked as a waitress. She has worked as, I guess, what here in China we call an entertainment worker, where you dress up with elaborate hair and makeup and stand around serving drinks in a specialized kind of bar and lighting people's cigarettes and what have you. I'm not hating on her for that. And, by her own account, her life in the past, before she converted to Islam, she spent a lot of time in nightclubs and discos and bars. And as she says, having her heart broken. And, I'm not going to speculate on what that means, but to some extent we all know what having your heart broken means. And this has led up to her making the sudden, I think, rash decision to
purchase a Quran and read it from...
She did not read it from cover to cover.
The start, continuing on.
She did not read it from cover to cover. She did not read it from start to end. She read from the front cover to continuing on, and then decided to convert to Islam because, as she says, she found things in the Quran that were confirmed by science. But I think this is another Zelig-like case of ultra-conformism at the same time making you an ultra-exception. I mean, once that's normalized for you, once you've gotten used to being the white girl at the nightclub in Japan, once the thrill is gone from that, once it's worn off, well, now being the white girl in hijab in Japan, now she's the special white girl at the mosque. Now, it's the same pattern. She's the ultra-conformist, and she doesn't just become invisibly a low-key Muslim. She doesn't become a liberal,
Right.
watered-down Muslim. She goes all out the same way. She didn't just become a normal, immigrant to Japan. She had to go to this extreme where she's, wrapping herself in the Japanese flag, becoming kind of a, Japanese nationalist. Same way she's really wrapping herself in Islam. And the more she conforms, also the more she stands out. She stands out within Islam, she stands out within Japanese society, et cetera, and she gets a certain kind of undeserved fame, undeserved notoriety, unearned attention. And I think that's what she's been after all along. So, I hope you get the impression. I don't say this with any hate in my heart, but I did have one really memorable conversation with Canada Jinsan via Facebook messages. And I wrote to her because of her series of videos that were new at that time. She made videos dealing with immigration law, immigration policy, and national identity in Japan. And at the University of Victoria, I just formally researched and wrote essays on that exact topic, including I looked at the specific laws. And I have never been more convinced that someone I was talking to was learning disabled and or literally retarded. I mean, I think she is someone who has very serious mental impairment, very serious problems. And we'll come back to that. I think one of the saddest things about religion, and you can even see this about Buddhism, religion preys on the weak. Religion preys on people who want to believe and need to believe. I mean, you can see it within a Christian church, you can see it within Catholicism, within, Protestantism, what have you. But, if you think...
bad for making fun of her grammar.
Yeah, but anyway, look, she's never announced that she doesn't identify as mentally retarded. But sure, I've just from my interaction with her, believe me, I've never been more convinced that the person I was talking to is a really serious mental disability or combination of learning disabilities and mental impairment or what have you.
But I agree. Religion preys on the weak.
Right, but I mean, it's really sad. Buddhism is a relatively harmless religion because it's against violence, which is very fundamental. Buddhism is in principle even against hurting a fly or a mosquito, by the way. But, whenever you look at Islam or Christianity, you'll meet people. Some of them are weak because they're ex-alcoholics, and they convert for that reason. They're trying to quit alcohol, trying to quit the bottle. Some of them are weak because, as Canada Jinsan, she had her heart broken. And that's the realest part of that video, is where she says she turned to Islam because she had her heart broken. She decided her life was sordid. I think I can use that word, sordid. And she wanted to turn over. She wanted to have a morally positive new chapter in her life. That's real. I totally relate to that. But also it is really sad to see that religion converts and appeals to and manipulates and controls people who are mentally and intellectually weak. They're not recruiting the brightest and the boldest. They're very often recruiting those who, have nowhere else to go and who lack the ability to scrutinize the scientific claims, the historical claims, even the ethical and moral claims of these religions that are very deeply flawed. I mean, very simply, you've probably, like the role of slavery within the Bible, without even getting into the Quran. Obviously within the Quran we have things, we have slavery and sex slavery and jihad. There are all kinds of issues. But even if you just stick with very simple issues like the status of slavery within the Old Testament, the New Testament, so it is what it is. So what, do we have a conclusion?
I only know about her because, you showed me her YouTube channel and we watched the video about her converting to Islam. I was just going based off that video. It just seems like she, like, as you say, she really wants to conform to these extremes. And it is kind of laughable when you're watching from a distance, but for her, it's her life.
It's a struggle,
and, I feel bad for laughing now. I would be against this if she were converting to Catholicism. You know.
I want to say with all due sympathy, when I was involved with Buddhism, I felt that my status as a Buddhist in the Buddhist religion would never change precisely because it wasn't based on faith. That's very different from Catholicism, very different from Judaism or Islam, right? It was like, well, here I am involved in this religion, and all I really need to believe is that these ancient texts are worth interpreting and worth discussing, that this philosophy is worth talking about in the same sense that the complete works of William Shakespeare are worth talking about, or in the same sense that Aristotle, Socrates, Plato are worth talking about. And that is a strength Buddhism has over other religions. To be a Buddhist, you do not have to believe in Indra. You do not have to believe there was any literal truth to a dialogue that's written between the Buddha and Indra. You don't have to believe in anything supernatural. You just have to believe that. But as I said in a video you can still find on this YouTube channel, the other element was believing in Buddhists as people. In order to be a member of the religious community, implicitly, it's not an explicit article of faith, I think you do have to believe, in effect, this is a community I want to be a part of, this is a group of people I want to identify with. You have to be a Muslim, ultimately, to identify publicly as a Muslim, you have to believe that Islam, as an actually existing religion, is a group of people you want to link your name to. And it was exactly in that way that I ultimately hit the hard limit with Buddhism. I had to recognize who Buddhists were as people, having flown all around the world, having met the best of the best, having been to the most elite Buddhist temples, having spent time in the most elite Buddhist universities, met Buddhist scholars, etc., etc. I'd literally gone to caves where monks meditated, some very beautiful and striking settings. Sri Lanka, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. Didn't really spend any time in Myanmar, but whatever. I'd been around the Buddhist world. I'd met the best and the brightest of that religion. And at the end of that process, I had to reflect on who those people were, what the religion was to them, and how I fit into it. And I think for Canada Jinsen also, if there's something that's going to make her wake up to the fact that Islam is a religion she should extricate herself from, it's a religion that she should exclude herself from, it'll probably be the extent to which those people actually existing Muslims to which they exclude her. When she recognizes the extent to which she is rejected and excluded for being who she really is. And low-key, that's probably why she became disillusioned with Japaneseness and being a Japanese nationalist. She must have finally put the pieces together. To quote a current rap song by OMBPZ, "You can love the streets, they won't love you back." It doesn't matter how much you wrap yourself in the Japanese flag, those people are never going to embrace you. You're always going to be the funny, laughable outsider. And you can go to the nightclub and get a lot of flattering attention from Japanese guys who've never had the chance to flirt with a white girl before. You can be the freak again and again and again. But from her perspective, she's trying to conform like Zelig, it'll never love you back. The Japanese are never going to give you back that recognition you're giving them. By definition, in cleaving onto Japanese nationalism, and she tried to go through the immigration process. I remember she made a video that was like low-key heartbreaking about how she planned to have a child and not teach the child English. Like she would have like a half Japanese baby in Japan and raise it only speaking Japanese because she was such a pro-Japanese nationalist assimilationist. She wanted to lose herself in that Japanese identity. But when they're looking at you, they ain't lost you. They know exactly who you are, exactly what you are. You're always the odd one out. You're always the butt of every joke when your back is turned. As laughable as it may seem for us, for me as a white Canadian, to look at her as a white Canadian assimilating into Japanese identity, it's much more laughable from the perspective of those people who really represent that Japanese identity. And she'll figure it out sooner or later. But as laughable as she is from my perspective, as a nihilistic ex-Buddhist white Canadian, as laughable as that may be from my perspective, it is much more laughable from the perspective of the Muslim people who really live and really represent that religion. And so, her status in that community, she will never quite fit. And if I can make a prediction for the future, I'd guess for that reason, she's going to lose faith, not in the tenets of the religion, but she's going to lose faith in the religious community as a group of people that ultimately can never accept her and where she can never accept her own place.
À-bas-le-ciel.